Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me today. Excited to tell your SMU story. We were chatting a little bit before. I think you're the first home builder we'll have had, but then also our first person with NASA on their resume as well. So a little bit of a tee up for what's to come. But before we get started, could you please introduce yourself for our audience?
Absolutely. I'm Benjamin Lavine, class of 1998, BBA from Cox School of Business. I majored in finance, and I'm proud to say I minored in history. And I'm now I'm one of the owners of Stone Acorn Builders. We started in Houston, expanded to Austin in 2019. So I run Austin, and my business partner runs Houston, and then we just expanded to Dallas this summer of 25.
Exciting stuff. Had to get back to the hilltop. I imagine that was always a goal.
Yes.
As we go full circle here, you mentioned Houston. Houston's home for you. Class of 98 SMU. What was your journey like to SMU? How did it come on the radar? And ultimately, what led you to pick that as your undergrad selection?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was a few things. I mean, one of them was I had exposure to, small schools like SMU, or smaller schools like SMU. Just growing up in Houston, I mean, literally my first college football game that I went to with my dad was Rice versus SMU, and it was,
Awesome.
it was 1982. It was the Pony Express. So, I kind of, at a young age, I kind of had this impression of like what SMU was, but never even stepped foot in Dallas. We were a family we were big into college athletics, but, and I knew what U of H looked like. I knew what UT and A&M looked like. And I think kind of, when I was looking for schools, I was like, just it didn't sit well with me to be in like a 300 to 1 ratio where it's 300 kids to one professor.
Right.
So when I saw the ratio of SMU, student teacher ratio was I think it was like 11 to 1 or might've been 12 to 1 at the time. I was like, okay, that I can see. And I went to a big high school. And you even at a big high school, and you kind of get to know your teachers still if you make the effort. And I think that was one thing that attracted me. The other thing was just, it was in Texas. But I wasn't at a big state school, and, Rice, it's more engineering and science based. And so SMU was really attractive because it was in an urban core like Dallas, but, so you weren't out in kind of the middle of nowhere, and I kind of like the idea of like, okay, this school is really connected to the city. And growing up in Houston, there's a lot of industry, right? There's petrochemical, there's oil and gas, there's some aerospace, there's, a lot of the big med center. But my first visit to SMU was just like, wow, like the corporations that are here, like they were just so different.
Right.
They were like household names. Whereas like Houston, there's a lot of really big companies that employ a ton of people, but they're not necessarily household brands. And
Right.
so I think I was kind of seduced by that. But so I think just, business school, staying in Texas, smaller classroom ratio, I wanted to get to know my professors. And I think that those kind of things were kind of my, they were important to me. And looking back, and, back then, I mean, like I got the application, I loaded in the typewriter, and I had to get the typewriter to line up on the application. I mean, it was just, it's totally different now, obviously with the Common App and everything, and I only applied to like 1 or 2 schools.
Wow.
I didn't really have a plan B. So I got in, and I never looked back.
I love it. That's great to hear you describe kind of mid to late 90s, how the Dallas ecosystem fit with SMU and how attractive that was. Because I think that's such a selling point now too. Do you hear these students who say, it's a college campus inside of a giant city, and you have access to all these resources. So for you to even see that in your time, and that's only grown, I think has been a credit to SMU and how well they've been able to bridge the gap between this large business hub and then an academic institution who can work really well together. You had mentioned
that's
sorry?
gotten better. I mean, like when I was there,
Oh my gosh.
the university was still kind of looking inwards, after the death penalty. And, but even more, in Houston, Rice is going to be really focused on like the medical community, and it's going to be really focused on engineering. SMU is just like, there's so many majors you can choose from,
So many.
and you can really, there's a high likelihood you could end up in Dallas after graduation. And
Hmm.
that was evident in the 90s for sure. So
So you had the foresight of knowing the business community. You wanted to be in Texas. The science engineering where Rice might pull you wasn't maybe on the top of your mind at the time. You mentioned a Cox degree in finance and then a history minor. What were you like in school? Were you a sponge wanting to learn it all? Did you know, I want to go make money, I want to go be in business? Kind of, how did you play out those 4 years as it related to your academics and kind of a career trajectory?
I had a lot of fun in high school. So, and I think by the time I got to SMU, I think a lot of kids are in reverse order. I think
Hmm.
they're really focused in high school and they make great grades, and then they get to college and they kind of,
Right.
it's a different thing. I think I was this probably somewhere in between a sponge and then also just kind of wanting to experience independence. So, you know, I took it pretty seriously. I've gone to more. I mean, I go to way more football games as an alum than I did as a student, and and maybe that had something to do with what we were putting on the field. But
For sure.
um,
I think that's a common thread for people who graduated from the 90s probably till 2015. I think I read a thing that if you graduated in 2010 or 2009, you're finally at 500 plus winning football. So
right,
that gap in between, there's a lot of things pulling you outside of the stadium.
right, yeah, 80. They say 89. I'm on the SMU alumni board, and they said that if you were there from 89 to 2000, so I guess you graduated 2004. They call us the lost generation.
There you go.
But the thing is, if you're kind of on the earlier side, like I was, like when I came to SMU, I mean, our first 2 years we were in the Southwest Conference. My last 2 years we were in the WAC, and so I had a memory of what it was like to be in a Power Five conference, and so, but I think a lot of people after us just had no, like they just didn't know what that was, like what was that
Hmm.
like, and so, yeah. So I mean, we could talk about SMU football all day long, but
For
I know
sure.
that's
Well,
probably what
think
you
think
didn't before.
the freshmen and sophomores just think of us as national powerhouses, right? Those freshmen have only been to a college playoff as their first year. So it's amazing how much can change. But yeah, so you had the mentality of, I'm going to get the most out of these 4 years and really take advantage of your academic time.
Yeah, I mean, I even told my kids that I was kind of a nerd, not a nerd, but I think initially, I think by the time as you know, when you get into your major and like your junior and senior year, you're seeing some of the same people in class. You're doing projects together, and then you're also, I mean, you're like, you don't need to like when you're a freshman sophomore, you're kind of like chopping down a tree with a sledgehammer.
Hmm.
But by the time you're a junior, senior, you're way more efficient. You're cutting it down with an axe. And so you have more free time. So got a lot more social junior and senior year for sure. A lot more
So,
social.
so if I told you end of your junior year, early part of your senior year, that you were going to be a business owner, home builder, where does that sit with you now? And then jump us back to like, where'd you start applying for jobs after school?
Yeah. So I would have never thought I would end up in home building at all. At all. I really, I thought I'd be like, you know, working towards being a partner in some firm or something like that. Um, my dad worked for the same company for over 35 years, and you know, I'm Generation X, so we were the first generation to kind of dismiss loyalty a little bit, and
Mhm,
so
mhm.
where it was, but our generation kind of like started leaving companies early, and that was kind of an affront to the boomers who were like, hey, we're used to like, and so I think I kind of brought that mindset with me from my parents' generation of like, hey,
Mhm.
if you could, if it all lines up, you should stay with the company. So yeah, if you asked me as a junior what I'd be doing, no, there's no way I'd believe you. Um, uh, I do remember, I studied abroad my summer before my senior year. I took two business courses in Austria, international finance and international accounting, And I kind of thought, oh, when we get back to school, it'll be, football season, it'll be fun. And then in the spring we'll interview. And then I got there and all my friends were like, no, dude, like you interview this fall.
You missed it.
And so I was like, okay. And then one of my friends was like, you need to get a suit. I'm like, oh, really? So, I mean, I remember running North Park Mall, like, and somebody at Brooks Brothers, like, helped me
Right.
put together a
Right.
suit for an interview. I mean, so yeah, I quickly got thrown into the cauldron of interviews my senior year in the fall.
Amazing. And so I think we were laughing before, your 6 years leading up to your ultimate career at Stone Acorn is a cool narrative, I think. Tell us how NASA came about, what you did in that stint, and then what then left to that kind of lily pad hop to management consulting to investment banking, and then where you kind of end up at those 6 years.
Sure, sure. So NASA was kind of an interesting deal. I'd always been kind of a fan of the space program. I grew up in Clear Lake, which is a suburb of Houston. And if you're familiar with Houston, Clear Lake is it's right where Johnson Space Center is. So essentially, I went to middle school and high school with, if their parents didn't work for the space program, they worked for a contractor that supported the space
Right.
program. It's pretty
So cool.
and it was not uncommon to have classmates whose parents were astronauts.
Wow.
And so, I ended up, I forgot about this story, but I ended up starting the first TV station at my high school. And so we just had a newscast every day and I was the producer. And, my girlfriend at the time in high school, her dad was an astronaut and she's like, you really should apply to NASA. They have like this internship program and they have this like, internal TV station. And I'm like, yeah, right. Whatever. I mean, it's just far-fetched,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
applied right out of high school before I started my freshman year and I interned that first summer. And, I thought I wanted to go into TV, like
Yeah.
either, television production or movies. And so I kind of went into it with that attitude and the internship was structured that way. And then it turned out there's like no money in TV at all.
For
Like,
sure.
I mean, my good friend Thaddeus Matula, you've had on, like
Yeah,
he's done,
yeah.
but he's like the small percentage,
For sure. And his story was even a fight till the bitter end to make it happen. No, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, he's the success story. So I kind of knew real quick, like, okay, this is not, but the folks there like me. I like them. I ended up doing some really cool stuff, with like different space missions where,
That's so awesome.
we would record, experiments and then we'd get to, record the astronauts training and stuff like it was cool. So I did that for 3 summers while I went to SMU. And then, while I was getting educated at SMU, it became apparent like, okay, business is really the way I should go. And,
Yeah.
NASA really doesn't, there's just I think that was one of the things that was like, if you're going to be in business and work for NASA, you're just going to be, you're going to be a bean counter. There's not a lot of transactional opportunity there. And so, but it was a great experience, honestly. So
that's so cool. I mean, you forget about the communities outside of NASA and how, like you said, all your classmates' parents are astronauts or, engineers on the space station. That's such a unique thing to have as a part of your upbringing. So thank you for sharing that. You kind of come to the realization that, yeah, maybe sometimes the passions or the hobbies that you find of interest may not lead to the most financially viable career opportunities. Is that where management consulting was, hey, I know this, I have a diverse set of skill sets and interests. I can do this and work on a few different projects and still kind of, again, maybe this is a long-term fit, but it does give me optionality in some career choices.
Yeah, how I got into management consulting is it was an accident. I shouldn't have done it, but I know how I got there. It was 1998 or 97, going into 98, and it was a hot job market. I mean, if you were looking for a job at graduation, like there was something wrong because they were just, I would almost say they were handing out jobs, coming out of SMU.
Nothing better.
So, but at the same time, I felt like, I was interviewing for management consulting jobs and investment banking jobs at SMU. And the investment banking offer, like they have an interview process at the time, and it may still, we're they interview in the fall, and then in January and February they have these, like they call it Super Saturdays, and so you'd
Mhm,
actually
mhm.
go out there and you'd spend the weekend, and they really wanted to know who you were, like could they spend 18-hour days with you,
Right.
you know, you know, and that and for whatever reason we were I had three offers from three management consulting companies, and they were like expiring in December, and it was like so I think I kind of just said, you know what, I'm just going to count the bird in hand,
Right.
and I'm just going to, I didn't want to kind of go into the spring, and so I just did it that way, and not really knowing what a consultant did, and so I'll keep it real short. When I could not explain to my parents what I did, uh, I knew that I like probably picked the wrong industry to be
Oh,
in.
man.
So, but I mean, I did get valuable experience from it,
Absolutely.
um, but it just wasn't for me. I was on a plane all week. I was never, I was living in Dallas, but I was hardly ever there.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's when, I got a finance degree, and I enjoyed finance. And so I was like, you know what, let me try to get into investment banking. And so that was hard because, they really want
Totally.
you undergrad. They don't want to retread somebody, if you will. And so, but I was able to parlay that. But yeah, accounting was my first love in college, but
Okay.
my year, they put a fifth year on. And when they put a fifth year on,
Mm.
I was like, I just didn't want to make my parents pay for a fifth year. And
More
so I,
school. Yeah.
so I just did, I did finance, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the numbers part.
So
So
I think here's the point where I think for me, I'm fascinated to know what was the ultimate career pivot that you've obviously you have the ability and the skill set to get hired in management consulting. They wanted you there. You're able to get back into industry through investment banking, which is extremely challenging out of industry back in. So you obviously have what it takes to succeed in those. What was it about those, or maybe it was nothing about those and it was just the opportunity uh, to go into home building that ultimately you said, I'm ready for this challenge or this industry? What was it that allowed you to make that decision of, okay, I'm totally pushing aside the things I studied for, the things I've worked so hard for to pursue a career in, and maybe you didn't, maybe you thought it was a temporary piece. Walk us through just kind of that decision process and the opportunity that came up for where you are now.
yeah, so I think, I'll kind of take you through when I went from management consulting to investment banking. I was thrilled because, what I loved about it was I discovered I was a very tangible person. I
Mhm.
liked tangible thing, not physical, but just like things you could kind of point to, either on a screen or a piece of paper, or you could touch. And so management consulting to me was just, it was a little too conceptual.
Mhm.
Um, and you were kind of at the whim of whatever the partner sold the client on. Whereas investment banking, you were hired to do either, a fairness opinion, or, put together, if you're helping with M&A, you're figuring out the value of a company. I mean, there's a true skill in that. Um, and then private placement, same thing. You're going out and raising money, but it's all based on numbers and value and some sort of multiple. And to me, that's like the lifeblood of any business, is the numbers,
Mhm.
and the financial numbers. And so I really enjoyed that. Like going from management consulting to investment banking, it was just, kind of came home every day. I was tired and there were long hours, but like it was nice to know that everything I did that day was working towards the goal of like finding an answer to the question. And the question
Right.
is, these companies are like, hey, what are we worth? Or what is this company worth that we're going after? And to me, that was just like, that was really thrilling. But, I was at that time, I was finally married, and, you know, I'd come home at 2 in the morning and then go back at 8,
Mm.
and so I kind of saw that could be a problem in the future, with,
Mhm.
when you maybe want to start considering, starting a family. And at the same time, while all this is happening, and I'm kind of enjoying, investment banking,
Mhm.
my sister had started a home building company, but, she had a law background. She was with Vincent and Elkins.
Wow.
But she had an eye for design, and she could really piece things together really well. Her father-in-law was a retired home builder, and our mother was a realtor, and so we kind of had that real estate construction component
Hmm.
um, to it. But my sister really didn't have a business background, and so she really that's the piece that she was needing, and so she was like, "Hey, give me a year. If you don't like after a year, no hard feelings. You can go back to investment banking or whatever you want to do." And so that's kind of how I got there.
And was she asking you? Were you kind of walking the two at the same time, where you kept your investment banking job while kind of consulting with her and helping on the finance side of the home building business, or did you just go rip the Band-Aid off and say, "I'm going to help you for a full year and see if we can make a business out of this"?
Yeah, rip the Band-Aid off. It
Wow.
was a hard conversation because I went to two of the partners and I was just like, listen, like I'm leaving my dream job, but but I want to try this,
Yeah.
because it sounds really interesting. And I think, these partners were kind of like, they'd been around long enough that they were like, well, hey, it's not like you're going off to some, you're running some family meatpacking business. Like,
Mhm.
they understood like, this sounds exciting. You should try it. And
Mm.
so, I think they left the door open if I wanted to come back, and I asked for the door to be open.
Okay.
Um, and so, I never had to use it, but I asked for the door to be open, and they, at least verbally, they told me it was open if I ever wanted to come back. So
And so did you see, I mean, you're in a well-paid investment banking career with a high upside. Did you see the potential to match that in year 1 or 2 in the home building side, or was it really just that you wanted to be on the ground floor, build something with your sister, and kind of have some more entrepreneurship that sold you on this concept?
yeah, I mean, I think financially, I was definitely taking a hit, but
Mhm.
I was married, and my wife was supportive of this move, and it's I think I could have done it not and not been married, but it definitely helps, and so, but I believed in the vision. I believed in kind of like the potential of, being able to, build something from the ground up, or take it from what it was to something bigger.
And so what's the initial business plan? Is it, okay, we need to build 2 homes in a year for this to work? Or what was, kind of in simple terms, dumbed down, what needs to be done in that year to 2 years before for you to know this works, I'm ready to scale it, or I'm calling uh, the bank back and trying to get my job back?
Right. Yeah. We started out as we were spec builders. I mean, we
Mm.
did speculative homes. So, you got and you get the construction loan and you acquire the land, and we did scattered lots. So we were, in the urban core of Houston, and, you know, and I think I think if had we not experienced some success early on, I probably would have, had to reevaluate it. But, we were able to build products, and they were able to sell relatively quickly, and we were able to move on to the next one. And so really that's how we started out. And my sister was excellent at design, and not just like not interior design, but like floor plans.
Right.
Because that's one of the things that, you know, I mean, you see a new house go up all the time, and it was amazing what we would see, an architect might think a certain layout would work, and it just like, the market always speaks. I mean, like
Right.
if you're talking about, retail, or you're talking about finance, the market will always tell you what it thinks, you know. Um, and so real estate's no different. The market will tell you what it thinks of your product. And so, we kind of saw some of the problems of some of the layouts, and I felt like my
Mm.
sister was really good at layouts, and I think that, you know, that kind of helped us, get a good start, in terms of.
So you had a sister who had the design eye, really kind of knew where issues were in the marketplace that she felt was of more of need. What of your background from working education did you think really helped the company or allowed you to succeed in this role, kind of from the jump?
Yeah, so she was, I would say, high level, if you took a high level look at it, my sister was really, more creative,
Hmm.
in terms of the homes we built. But she also, if I kind of summarize the information, whether it be financial or just looking at different options, she was really good at making, decisions, like key decisions,
Mm-hmm.
um, whether it's real estate or selections or whatnot. Where I kind of brought value was just like being able to, quickly understand like where we were on a project, profitable, not
Mm-hmm.
profitable, like
Mm-hmm.
if we were running in the wrong direction, she just didn't have the skill set and really the time to really delve in and kind of develop that kind of business acumen part of
Yep.
her. And so, I was able to do that piece internally, externally, like when we would go to get a construction loan. Um, I mean, the banker does not want to, they don't want a kind of a situation where they have a builder that's like, the dog ate my homework and they
Mm-hmm.
keep asking for different documents. They want a nice
Mm-hmm.
package. And I knew like investment banking, like
Right. You could
you had to
formalize that
deliver a package
presentation.
very
Yeah.
concise. So I was able to do that. And then also with clients, when we would present things, I could present them in such a way that they were kind of used to seeing it in corporate America, and they were like, "Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is familiar."
Well, that's a
Um,
great point. So do you
so those,
remember how many homes y'all did in that kind of first, call it year, 2 years of you guys formally being together?
God, we probably did. I think we did around 5 homes that first two
Wow.
years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what, homes in the first 2 years, was there a moment when you and your sister knew this business plan y'all working together was going to work that would then parlay this into a, quarter century lifelong business today?
Yeah, I think when we got our first custom, um, I think we kind of knew like, okay, like we're doing something right, because I think that's a moment where, you know, somebody walks through a product of yours that's a spec home and they're like, you know, I don't really want to live in this location, but can you build me something very similar to it with
Mm,
the few ideas I have on my lot? And you're like, oh, okay. Like that's, I think when my sister and I knew like, okay, we figured it out, like
okay.
someone wants to hire us for our skills, not so much like that we have this great location and like we put it
Right.
all together, So I think that was the moment. That was like 2003 or
Okay.
2004. That's where we know.
It's
Okay.
relatively pretty quick. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us where you are today. I mean, you mentioned kind of in the opening that you've expanded to from Houston to Austin. Dallas is a new emerging market, but is it all custom homes? Kind of tell us the evolution of the business and where it went from those first years of spec to kind of that gradual move into custom and kind of volume and what you guys kind of really specialize in now.
Yeah, so we started out as spec, um and then I think, we would kind of do mostly spec, and then every now and then we'd have a custom client. It wasn't the main part of our business, but it was but we got to 2007, 2008, and then we had the financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go into a sub story of how we
I'm sure.
survived
Yeah.
that one, but the short story is we learned really quickly how to pivot and become custom home builders, because
Mm,
there were people who sat on the sidelines and did not purchase anything during, from 2004 all the way through 2008. And they were ready. They were like, but they needed, but if you were a builder who had, who was solvent and hadn't gone bankrupt, which we
mm-hmm.
hadn't, um, we didn't overextend ourselves, but we found out really quickly, like, hey, you know what? We're pretty good at design. We're pretty good at selections. We're really good at communicating. Like, you know, this is going to be what we sell ourselves as. And so we went from there, from 2009 all the way, to 2019, we were really more custom. We would do maybe one spec a year. So totally
Mm.
flipped.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a big change in our business. Austin, my brother-in-law, he's been in Austin for over 20 years, and he, for years he would say like, oh, you guys need to expand up here. And I'm like, nah, whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of dismissed him. And then I think one year he kind of kept asking me, you really need to come up here. And I said, well, why? And he's like, well, he says, they're just not, he's like, Houston's got a lot of seasoned builders, but he says like Austin really doesn't, like, they have a few, but they're just, there,
Mm.
there's, there are fewer seasoned builders and there's just way more inexperienced builders and guys that, that kind of present themselves as builders, but they really, all they know how to do is flip houses. And so,
Right.
he just kept saying, you really need to look at it. So we went and visited, and then the realtor that we were working with showed us around, and and I start to understand like, okay, this is an interesting city. It's kind of like in its adolescence. It's not matured like Dallas and Houston.
Right.
There's really a lot of growth, and so that kind of prompted our move to go there and do more. Our intention was to do spec homes there.
That's how nerve-wracking is it to go from a market that you've, because everyone knows you live in Texas, like Houston, Austin, Dallas. Yeah, everyone knows we're Texas, but if you live here, how different those people are and how different those markets are. Was that, I imagine, as a home builder, that's you know how to appease and know the Houston clientele. What's it like getting into a Dallas or an Austin? Like, how do you have to have boots on the ground? What's the timeline look like? How daunting is that process?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need boots on the ground, whether it's you or someone on your team, for sure. That's what prompted me to move to Austin to be here every day. Um, in terms of timelines, I mean, I would say Houston is very developer friendly. Um, some would argue almost too developer
Right,
friendly,
right.
whereas I think Dallas is probably, somewhere in the middle, and then Austin's kind of at the other extreme.
Mm,
There's a lot of preservation, a lot of historical, a lot of tree preservation in Austin. There's a lot of places you just can't build. I mean, they're just that you can't build. And I think that also has some benefits. I mean, it maintains home values, um, that sort of thing, quality of life. Um, so um, I think the timelines are in some cases a little longer in Austin, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
once you kind of figure them out, and understand them, it's not too bad. So.
So talking about the home industry as a whole, what should like the people think about in terms of buying spec, custom, buying existing? How do you kind of bucket those, and how should clients and prospects think about their own journey and what's the right fit and or when's the right timeline and pros and cons of each? Maybe, obviously we can go in depth on all those, but
Right.
maybe just kind of high level on some tips to think about.
Right. I think one of the, when if you're a client and if you're wanting to buy a home, I always tell our clients that come to us that want to potentially build a custom. Most of the time when they come to us, we're kind of like the last resort. And I know that sounds negative, but it's usually, I don't like what's out there. These builders, they're building what they're building doesn't really fit my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or, it's just not in the right location. Um, and I think that's when you want to do a custom home, that's what we end up experiencing. In terms of just like, I think you're going to spend the same, like a spec home may seem expensive, but the builder has all the carrying costs, wrapped up and
Mm-hmm.
including the land and everything. Whereas if you're if you're going to do a custom as a client, your construction cost should be pretty competitive, but you have to factor in like you have the holding cost for, if it's going to be your lot, so you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to hold that. You might have to hire an architect separately, so you'll end up paying the same. Um, that's just kind of how economics works.
Yeah, yeah. That's useful. So what, as we kind of close up here and let you get all on you with your day and build more homes, what, if you could look back now knowing the career you've had and the arc that got you there, is there anything you would have done differently? Would there have been other subjects? And I lead that to say, like, for those future home builders out there, people who want to get into home building, should they go work for a big home builder before? What are some things they can do to prep themselves to maybe, you know, hit the ground running or have, a long trajectory and career going forward?
Right. I mean, I think the secret to our survival has been, I mean, I do personally feel that the secret to our survival has been just honestly, and I know this sounds, really cheesy, but the skills that I learned as an undergrad, and especially in the business school,
Yeah.
like I use them today. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about AI and in AI tools, but you know, I mean, I work with investors now. We put together pro formas for investors to do spec projects with, and like if I didn't have those concepts and I didn't know how to run financial models, like I couldn't have survived. And then just to know, you know, how healthy your business is cash flow wise. Like that's, a lot of people get into building because, they're in the construction industry and then they
Right.
start like would go be a builder, but they don't know how to remain solvent. They don't know how to remain like a healthy business. And so, it's a lot healthier to get into home building, kind of understanding some sort of, have some sort of financial background, and then you kind of learn the building business. So if you don't have an understanding of the business, it's not a good recipe for survival. What I would have done differently, I probably, if I had known I could have double minored, I think I would have like gotten one more minor in the humanities because,
Mm,
I don't know, that's just,
the
that
soft
would have been,
skills.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think that would have been, yeah, I would have worked a different part of my brain, and
totally.
I think humanities are going to be, I mean, Deadman, I think is going to be a huge, uh, puzzle piece in the next, 50 years for SMU because, with AI, I think that's changing the way, engineering and business is being done. And so I think humanities is going to be really important. So
I'm glad you said. I think that's spot on. I think that's something these all universities need to make sure they don't lose touch with, uh, for the future of our students and professionals, that they have these skills outside of just the tools that you think, the AIs, these things that are going to kind of like autopilot some of the things we do. We've got to think outside of that and be a little more philosophical in how we do things. But Benjamin, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for making the time. We're lucky to
absolutely.
have you as a resource to our group for all home building related questions. So we'll make sure to share your information. We'll have more ways for people to connect with you, and hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more Stone Acorn Builder signs in the DFW Metroplex and as
Absolutely.
close to campus as possible. So thanks
You
again.
got it. All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Talk soon. See ya.
This episode of SMU Stories is made possible by our incredible sponsors, Security National Bank, Hilltop Property Tax, SMU Cox School of Business, Mignon Steakhouse, and Sound of a Rose podcast.